Good morning and welcome to the banks of the Nene, and we're just wandering into, I'm just checking I'm on the right path, which I am. We're just wandering into the village of Cotterstock, another of the sort of Anglo-Saxon agricultural settlements. I've driven through it many times, and I always look out the car window and think that looks interesting, and what is that and what is this. I know a little bit about the Watermill that was here, so there's little bits of interest here. It's got an interesting church as well, so I figure it's time to jump out the car and have a wander around and see what we can find. And like I say, it dates back to the Domesday Book. It's in the Domesday Book. There was a Roman villa not far from here, sort of midway between Cotterstock and Glatthorne, so the Romans could stake a claim to being here first. But in terms of an organised settlement, as ever, it's Anglo-Saxon. So I'm going to crack on, try and find a way up onto the road, and we'll head into the heart of the village where a lot of the history actually sits, and see what we can find. How to get out of here? That'll do. Oof, that wasn't easy. This is the first of two bridges leading up to the village. This is the Nene itself. The next one will be the mill race, which is nearly as wide, but this is the actual river. Taken from a similar spot to this 70, 80 years ago. That is the Watermill up ahead. On the left is the mill, on the right is the admin office for the mill, both on either side of the bridge that we're coming up to. And it stood there until 1968, and then there was a fire in that admin office on the right. They had electrical gear in by then. They were powering the mill with electricity rather than with the water wheel, and it backfired because the electrical gear caused a fire in the admin office, which devastated the whole mill. They did rebuild part of it, namely the granary part of it, or it was the granary building, which is on the left, and they kept milling electrically, I think, until the end of the 70s, and then it all finished. But yeah, it was a huge mill, as you can see in the old picture, sitting on the bridge, dominated the village, and it's very hard to imagine today because clearly there's nothing much left to see, but we'll pick out a few things as we get down to the bridge. There was a mill here from Domesday Book time, so 11th century, possibly even before then, but that would have been a small wooden mill. I think the stone mill that we see in that old picture was probably early 1800s onwards, and when it was electrified, which was sort of mid 1900s, it was done so by I think it was the Bradshaw family who ran Perio Mill, which is the next one downstream. They bought it to extend their business, and it was them who said, let's not do the wheel and the millstones, let's bring some electrical machinery in. Kept the buildings until they burnt down, but they kept it going as a mill, as I say, until, despite the fire, until the late 70s, which is much later than any mill building I know of in this area. The mill building would have ran right down to the wall there. You can just see those sort of stone curbing stones, in the centre there. That would have been where the front of the mill building was. This sluice gear is all part of the mill setup to control the flow down to the water wheel. Although I think I'm right in saying that would be what's known as the spillway, where they chuck the spare water they didn't need away. I think the feed to the water wheel, might be wrong, is the one over there. And the big tall building there is what used to be the granary building, the only surviving building from the mill days, but even that was rebuilt after the fire. It was badly damaged by the fire, but not fully destroyed, and they basically rebuilt it to carry on milling here electrically. It is now flats, a building full of flats. A surefire way of identifying how successful any watermill is by the size of the mill house, and that is one mighty mill house. That's where the miller would have lived. Built in 1803 by James Rickett, who was the miller here at the time. Fantastic building. It's the old granary building. I suspect this was the building where the post-1968 fire rebuild. I guess this is where all the milling work was done. It didn't need water. It just used electrical gear. It's referred to as the old mill. Interesting set of steps outside the mill building, the mill house, sorry. Generally they're used, or were used, to climb up and jump into your carriage, your horse-drawn carriage, so they date back a long way. It can't be anything else. Yeah, you climb up there, your carriage pulls up alongside. Didn't have a pavement back then. And you jump in your carriage, or alight from your carriage. Interesting. Another old sort of, I don't know, 50, 60-year-old picture here from this spot, which again gives you an idea of just the size and magnitude of the mill. And just that one building to the far right in the old picture, still standing. Although this is the rebuilt version after the fire, but still recognisable. Before we get a close-up look at the church, I'm just looking across from the fields, and again, similar to Marham, you've got a sort of Norman tower to the left, slightly later nave in the centre there with the main entrance, and then on the right you have that massive chancel. There's a reason for that, which I'll come on to later. But yeah, it doesn't kind of fit with the rest of the church, so it's another conglomeration of buildings across the ages, with windows across the ages as well. But we'll talk more a little later when we get round to the church. Just coming up to the village cross, which I gather got moved several times in the 1800s until it reached this final destination. I can't find too much about this one. I mean, it's set up to look like an old Anglo-Saxon cross. It isn't, for sure, but I don't know about that base. Could be. Is that old? I don't know. Maybe not Anglo-Saxon. I think it would have said in the records if it was. Yeah. I think it dates back to the late 1800s in terms of siting it here. And I think parts of it were rebuilt in the late 1800s as well. But it looks like the bit at the bottom might be old. If I find out a bit more about that base, I'll add it to the video. Across the way here, embellished with some flowers at the top, is an old 1800s lamppost. There's two of them in this area, and that's one of them. Gaslight, one assumes, of course. I think the other one is a better one because I think it was I was going to say rebuilt. I don't mean rebuilt, I mean tidied up. Restored is the word I was looking for, in the 1970s, so the one nearer the church should be better. Cotterstock Church. That's the other late 1800s lamppost. gas lamppost as it would have been. Restored in the 1970s. Let's see if we can get in. Well, it took some getting in. The door was bolted shut, but we're in now. That's an old one. One of those coffin slabs. Used to have a big cross at each end, apparently. You still see the remains on the one on the right. It's 1300s, 1400s. Pretty old. If ever you find yourself reading up on the history of Cotterstock Village, whether it be online or in a book, you'll very quickly run into the phrase Cotterstock College, which conjured up in my mind visions of educational establishments, but it's nothing to do with that. It dates back to the 1300s, a long time back, and it all related to a guy called John Giffard, who was a rector here at Cotterstock until I think it was 1317. He then went on travels around the country, ended up in pretty big places like York, London. He got in with the royal family. He was an acquaintance, if you like, of the Queen at the time. So he was a bigwig, basically. He was a big name. He made a good name for himself, and he made a good fortune for himself. And back in the 1300s, we were a far more God-fearing nation than we are now. And there was a real obsession back then with the afterlife, basically. Where do we go after we die? And bear in mind, people didn't live as long back then, so it was a very hot topic as soon as you reached a certain age. And there was a belief that there was a stage in going on to better places, to heaven, call it what you wish. There was a stage called purgatory, where basically people would be assessed. After you passed on from this life, you would be assessed as to whether you were worthy to then pass on to heaven, or whatever you want to refer to it as. And that purgatory thing really got into people's heads. It was about, you know, what are your sins? What have you done wrong? What are you going to do about it? You know, how long have you got to do penance before we let you through? And people got really wrapped up about that. And one of the supposed religious rules of purgatory was that if you had people down here saying prayers for you after you died, the more people that said those prayers and the more important the people were that said those prayers, the faster you will get through this purgatory stage and get up to heaven where you want to go. So the college was something that was set up by John Giffard right here in this chancel that was built to cope with it. And basically he had, I think it was 12 or 13 religious people, you know, members of the church who were full-time based here, who prayed and went through various religious mass services in this building all day long, day in, day out, and they would be saying prayers for Mr. Giffard, for the Queen, for the Queen's acquaintances, all the important people that he knew, in the hope and in the belief that when he passed on, having this college, if you like, here, would race him through to where he wanted to get to. It went on until the 1500s. I think it was King Henry VIII who basically said not having that. And that was the end of it. So it was going on for best part of 2 centuries. But the people here, the religious people that were spending their daytimes praying for Mr. Giffard and co, they lived here. They had their own buildings, they had their own, you know, sleeping quarters, places where they ate. They almost had their own little village based around the church, and there's nothing left to show that. People have said, well, if you dig up in the right places, you'll find the foundations. Others have said the farmhouse around the back of the church, which we'll see in a minute, is definitely part of those buildings. So they were here, they were on the other side of the church, so we'll wander around and have a look if there is any signs. But yeah, there was a whole, like I say, sort of monastic setting here to feed this Cotterstock College. But as I say, if you read up on Cotterstock Village, you're going to bang into Cotterstock College very quickly, and that was what it was all about, a sort of professional prayer house. Can't imagine what that was. It seems too low to be a window. Some nice stone grave slabs there with the traditional cross marking on it on the right. A lot of old stones here, a lot of them are very hard to decipher. Very impressive ceiling mouldings up there. The tower is Norman in age, definitely. That ghost door down there with the arch at the top, classic Norman that is. Filled in now of course, but yeah, it's very old. 1100s, 1200s. Very impressive. That's very nice. I don't know about the door's not that old. The archway is Norman. That is a classic Norman arch at the top there. Perfect sort of semicircular. Well decorated Norman arch. Indeed, I think the windows above it are as well. Just coming down the north side of the church now, and alongside the chancel, this bit that sticks out here was considered by many to be, without any proof, this was where the college prayer masters, when they'd finished whatever they were doing in the chancel, would head out of there, and their domestic quarters were over to the left, which is now a farmhouse. Now that's not been proven, but it's highly likely that that farmhouse was formerly, not in the form that it is now, but was formerly the domestic quarters for Cotterstock College. Nobody knows, as I say, unless they dig the place up, they'll never know. But it kind of makes sense that this sort of side wing of the chancel must have been going somewhere. Impressive windows. I just grabbed this distant view earlier of the church with the farmhouse to the right. You can probably get a better idea there that there looks likely to have been something joining the two, so that those church people, religious people that were part of the college in the chancel on the left would be able to shuffle through into what is now the farmhouse as their sort of domestic quarters on the right. Makes more sense from this angle. There's quite a few references as well online and in history books to this stone trough, believed to date back to the time of the college, probably a bit older, and people have suggested, because of its age tying in with that of the college, that it had something to do with the college, although what they would be doing with a stone trough I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of references saying that somehow was connected to the college that was here. So I'm not sure quite how that works. I've been looking for signs in the wall here because history books say there are signs in this very wall of Anglo-Saxon masonry that probably dates from a building that was here before this church was built, but I can't find it. It's meant to be a herringbone style masonry, which I've seen at things like the Roman wall remains at Castor, so I know what herringbone masonry looks like, but I can't find it. The only bit I can see, because it's only meant to be a very small piece, is that there, where you've got stones that are not horizontal but are sort of going off in all directions, so that may well be it. Not very spectacular, but if others say that's Anglo-Saxon, then it's Anglo-Saxon. How it ends up and why it ends up in this wall, I don't know. The assumption being made is it actually belonged to an older building and has been incorporated in the wall, but I don't know. Not very convincing. Very difficult to find a gravestone to look into on this one because they're all worn out. I think the name on that one is Hannah, the beloved wife of George Baxter, who passed away something 1916, aged 70 years. Also the grave of George Baxter. I can't see any more. Might be able to look at that on the computer and make sense of it. I'll see if I can find out anything about those two people, and if I do, I'll put it on the bottom of the screen as ever. First grave in the churchyard in loving memory of Emma Levieux Dunham, who died July the 24th, 1948, aged 88 years. Pride of place. Right, say farewell to the church and move on. The house in the distance is or was Cotterstock House. Nothing overly significant, dates back to the early 1800s, but it's the sort of metallic and lead frontage porch, call it what you like, that I think makes it a listed building as much as anything. It's quite unusual. Makes it look perhaps a bit older than it really is. On the right here is the Manor House, which is going to be a struggle to see. Dates back to 1720, extended in the 1800s. There used to be two earlier manor houses somewhere in Cotterstock that are no longer around. This was the last of them, as I say, 1720s build. It's a nice house. If I can't get a decent shot, I'll put a photograph up. You can only just get a peep out of it through those gates. So I will be putting a photograph up, I'm sure. It's a lovely building, as a manor house should be. Beware of the dog, you have been warned. Cotterstock House again. Yeah, very unusual frontage really. The The building coming up on the right was the old vicarage, originally dated to 1651, but it got into a really bad state of disrepair and had to be pretty much rebuilt in the 1830s. But yeah, it's quite a grand building. Parts of that must be part of the 1600s original build, I would suggest. Bit of a trek from the vicarage to the church, but that's what it was. Coming up now to the grounds of Cotterstock Hall, which I suspect will be another one that you're not going to be able to see much of. But I'm ready for this because I have got a nice photograph or two somewhere. If I can't see it, it's in the background there, and you're not going to see it by the looks. That's the best you're going to get over the hedge top. I will put a photo up in a minute as well. It's a lovely building. Cotterstock Hall, 1650s. Very nice. Wish I could see it better. Another partly hidden building. This thatched cottage on the right is Gatehouse Cottage, presumably gatehouse to Cotterstock Hall, late 1700s. Nice. Can't tell you anything about that building apart from it's got a date stamp on it of 1864. Another surviving red phone box. Seem to be seeing quite a few of these. I think every village I've done's had a red phone box. Long may they survive. The building to the right of the phone box used to be the school. Not for long, late 1800s, closed in 1934. I think it opened, I read somewhere, in 1940 to house refugees. I don't know what it means by that, refugee kids, I don't know. Anyway, it was the school, is now the village hall. Guess what that was? There's a clue. The old post house, 1864. Some nice thatched, I think late 1700s, certainly 1700s, mid or late cottages, very nice. I think the cottage on the right there used to be 3, is now 1. That one on the left is a bit more interesting. I think that used to be 2. We used to have doors underneath those high lintels, and the low lintel, which is now a door, used to be a passageway that used to run down between the 2. It's been modified to 1 now, so yeah, central passageway in the middle, 2 doors either side, which you can just make out. 1700s. The village pound at Cotterstock used to sit pretty much where that garden is. In fact, looking at that stone in that wall at the front there, I suspect that may have been part of the village pound, or at least the stone from the village pound, but it used to be there. Trying to find where the one public house was here, known as the Gate. I can't find anything about the gate, apart from it was a pub. Can't find when it disappeared, but I think it was quite a long time ago. I will find it. That is it. That's the gate pub, or was, as I hope to prove with the sign on the wall in a minute. Yeah. Spring must be on its way. Right, that's it for Cotterstock. Not a great video. It's a lovely village. I just made a bit of a pig's ear, really, of videoing that one. I apologise for that. It's just one of those mornings. There's so much traffic on that road through Cotterstock. You cannot complete any sort of narration about what you're looking at without cars coming up and then another car behind them, lorries, heaven knows what. It should be a quiet village, but it most certainly is not. But that's probably a poor excuse. It's just one of those mornings. Couldn't get my mouth in gear, but at least you saw some pictures, and there's a few interesting places here. I just probably haven't done them justice, but I hope you enjoyed something. And as I say, as ever, any comments, throw them underneath the video, either on YouTube or Peter Images. Thanks for joining me once again, and I will see you next time I'm out.